Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talking Logistics, where we have conversations with thought leaders and newsmakers in the supply chain logistics industry. It's my great pleasure to welcome today's program Artur Zagoda, who is Director of Supply Chain IT Solutions at Axit, a Siemens company. And today we're going to talk about IT in the age of supply chain complexity, important attributes for success. Now, we know that complexity is kind of a normal part of supply chains today. But when you factor in the fact that it's an ever-changing, the nature of this complexity is ever-changing, and also the fact that it's rapidly changing, it really puts the spotlight on the need for IT systems to be able to enable and support supply chain processes in this kind of new environment. So what are the kind of the critical attributes for success in this age of supply chain complexity? Well, that's the main question that we're going to kind of dive into today with Artur, who's kind of in the front lines there at Axit, working with companies from across the different industries, and obviously from an IT perspective as well. So, Artur, great to have you on the program.
Hello, Darren. It's really great to have you also here and be there with all the audience. Complexity in the supply chain, I think it's rising in the last years, and especially with let's say the world which is getting flat. So I cannot imagine right now a manufacturer who doesn't have suppliers in Far East or in Europe, and vice versa, customers in the other parts of the world. So with all these e-commerce trends, what we have right now, I think it's pretty easy for any of us to just buy something from a manufacturer which is really hundreds or thousands of miles away. So this, this easy accessibility of all the products around the world because of internet. This makes also the supply chain, which is behind that, very, very challenging.
Yeah, no, I think you hit on a few things there, which I was going to, it was going to be my first question in terms of, what defines, this level of complexity, right? So, you talked about globalization, obviously a little bit there. You talked about e-commerce, which for not only retailers, but manufacturers are getting more and more involved in. Are there other, when you look at different industries that you work with, are there other factors or ways that you would say, gosh, this is kind of an example of how supply chains are getting more complex?
So I think that one of the issues is that many companies, they have a lot of internal initiatives to optimize their processes, and there is a certain end to which you can optimize the company itself without going beyond the four walls of your facilities and integrate with the external network. And this is definitely the next big step that can bring you a lot of benefits when you go out of the four walls, integrate with your suppliers, integrate with your customers, and try to build a kind of joint process across all these companies. And I believe on one side, this gives you potentially very big benefit. On the other side, this raises to the square complexity, because you are not only within your facility with your own people, sometimes your own culture, not only company culture but the country culture, but you are exposing your company to a completely different world. And I believe this is the main challenge for the current supply chain.
That's a great point. I think just to paraphrase a little bit what you said, I think when you look, a lot of companies have gotten to that point, which is never a finished project for them in terms of trying to get their internal processes in orders and systems in orders. But now I think a lot of more companies are recognizing the fact that they need to look beyond their four walls and really start improving their approach to truly supply chain processes, kind of the network approach to managing the different processes that go across entities. But there you've got, I think the buzzword, or the word that we've been talking about for many years, is the importance of collaboration, right? Collaboration from a people side of things, and then it becomes important from an IT side as well, right? In terms of being able to more effectively exchange information and knowledge, across company, the four walls of each individual company. Is that a kind of a fair summation of kind of how you view the complexity?
I think, yeah, this is a spot on. Especially this collaboration between different parties. This is something where with the current, let's say, analog tools, sometimes analog processes, what we have, we cannot compete with the others. So having a sometimes modern IT tool which supports you in this collaboration, this is also a key value.
Right. So yeah, I mean, I think we've seen globalization, continue to be a challenge, and of course, there's been a lot of buzz lately here after the U.S. presidential election with the role of NAFTA and free trade agreements. So you can see how that complexity is going to continue to change. On the e-commerce side, we just went through the holidays a few weeks back and saw the key role and growth, with e-commerce as well. I mean, what do you see as some of the challenges or hurdles that companies have to overcome, to address this complexity, particularly from an IT perspective? I mean, you talked about kind of some of the analog systems or perhaps outdated IT systems being one of them. What other challenges do you see companies facing in addressing this complexity?
So I think, you mentioned IT systems, and in many cases, the existing systems in many companies, they are pretty old-fashioned. They were developed, let's say, in the era where everybody thought about internal optimization. So they are not so open to this external collaboration. This is definitely one of the, let's say, IT hurdle everybody has. And based on that, talking to many customers of ours, I very often observe that there is also a big challenge in the processes inside the company. I mean that many companies are still very siloed structured. So there are different divisions or departments which do not really collaborate to each other. And on the contrary, at the end of, for example, a visibility project, what a company is introducing, so very often they do not see this as a benefit, but at the end it turns out that introduction such a modern IT tool which facilitates collaboration between not only external partners but also internally between different departments. This in fact demolish all the walls which existed before between departments. So people start really to collaborate more openly, and you get much more trust between different operations.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because on the one hand, you can make the argument. It's almost like the chicken and egg, right? I mean, you make the argument that you have to have a change in mindset, right, to truly be more collaborative, to really take a step back and say, okay, the status quo, the way we're currently doing our processes, very siloed fashion, as you mentioned, is not going to get us to that next level of success. So you have to address your processes or your way of thinking. It sounded like that what you said is that technology is a path to helping facilitate that mindset, right? Because some of the newer technology tools, particularly those that are cloud-based, that are network-based, while technology in and of itself is not a silver bullet solution, it can serve as that platform to at least open the eyes of people how there is a different way that you could potentially be working. Is that right?
Yeah, this is pretty correct. And all of us are using this new technology in our private life, and this is also a challenge for many IT software providers that people with this customs, let's say, with this behavior, they then expect something similar from commercial software. I mean, business to business software. So this is also a big challenge for IT providers. And I believe there are some of them who are really catching up and bringing this modern collaboration tools into an IT landscape of their customers.
Yeah, no, I agree. I want to come back to some of the success factors from an IT perspective, but just to stick with this, conversation around complexity. I mean, one approach to minimize complexity is to drive standardization, right? So if everybody did, certain processes the same way, it certainly, would facilitate things. But the reality is that every company, every industry has their own unique requirements and processes, right? So flexibility becomes important, particularly from an IT perspective. And then you also have the fact that, like I mentioned earlier, supply chains are continuously changing, and they're changing quickly. So agility is another, important factor. So how do you balance those three factors? Standardization, which could lead to, easing the complexity challenge, but then also the need for flexibility and agility.
Yeah, definitely this is a challenge, and especially if you do not have an IT landscape which is appropriate for that or helps you in that, then this is even more challenge. And I think the biggest thing is to, on one side, have an IT system which allows you to prepare a kind of standard modules for different parts of your global process. And then whenever different market or different requirements of your customer are requires to adapt it, then you can easily, flexibly modify that. For example, automotive industry, I believe is a pretty good case here, is for building a car. In fact, a lot of components in the car are standardized. So then an automotive manufacturer is able to build out of that really smart solutions. And I believe something similar on IT is also needed when you have some modular components for different parts of your process. But then you, as an owner of this IT infrastructure, you're able to combine it flexibly and prepare the solution for your own customers in a flexible way.
So this sounds like, just to make perhaps a silly analogy, but it's almost like, I've got 4 kids, and they're all big fans of Legos, right? So you have the little Lego blocks. So just to kind of make an analogy here, you can think of those Lego blocks as kind of the standard components, if you will, and it could be a standard, tendering function, or it could be a standard invoicing, function as an example. But every company is going to orchestrate or put together those processes in different ways based on the requirements. So it's having the flexibility, just like a child can put those blocks in very different ways. A company to be able to take those quote unquote standard IT components or standard process components and put them together in a way that meets their specific requirements.
Yeah, and this is a great example what you gave. So at the end, what is important is not that you, let's say you as an IT, is able to build the house for your children using the bricks. It's they who can just, so that the IT is so easy that the child or the business in this case is able, let's say, to combine it and to somehow design the process and the supportive IT themselves without, let's say, so big involvement of external consultants, external IT people, and so on. And I think this is the way how the world is the IT world is developing right now.
Yeah, that's a great point there at the end. I mean, I think many companies have undergone the pain, if you will, of these projects that were multi-year, multi-million dollars, right? And just took a lot of time. And I think the reality is today is that, number one, companies don't have that multi-million dollars of budget to spend, right? But even more importantly, more critically, they can't wait a year, 2 years, 3 years to enable some of the things they need to enable, because the competitive environment and customer requirements are changing so quickly. So I think it's that kind of puts new pressure on what IT needs to be able to deliver moving forward, right?
Yes, definitely it is.
So let's kind of explore that a little bit more. I mean, so how would you complete the following sentence, right? IT in the age of supply chain complexity must what? You know, in other words, what attributes or capabilities must companies look for?
So I would say IT must become a commodity. I mean that this is really not something sophisticated, a kind of secret knowledge kept only by a special group of people, and but a kind of simple to use tools which are easy to understand for by the business, and that the business themselves, they can imagine how easily just combine all of them to have an tool which can really support the real process and not vice versa. I see in many of our customers that they have the real process, and they have some tools which support parts of fragments of the process. But then there is a lot of manual processes around that just to make the real process running smoothly. So people use Excels, people use emails and different sort of communication, and only the head of the operator of this complex, let's say, environment, this is the only place where you see if you are able to see the complete picture of the process. So I think the role of the new modern IT is to be able to fill these gaps. So whenever you have a standard process, I don't know, in inbound logistics for a manufacturing company, and whenever they need some deviation, they need some additional parts in it, then you are able really to flexibly adapt the tool almost on the fly and cover this part which otherwise would be done manually. This is, I think, this being a commodity, being such a flexible modular software which you can combine together and build support for your processes. I think this is the main role for IT right now.
Yeah, so I just so that I understand, I mean, it sounds like what you're saying when you say, you know, commodity, is what you're basically saying is that, you know, the business people, in this case, let's say supply chain people, the ability for supply chain people to put on an IT hat and be able to be empowered and have the capability to enable new capabilities or functionality in response to whatever new requirements are coming their way, without having to, in most cases, having to, you know, put in an IT request with their IT department, you know, wait 3 months, 6 months, 9 months for, you know, to be able to have someone code, you know, what they need, et cetera. So really what you're trying to do is, as much as possible, put the capabilities and the tools and the know-how by making it easy to use, intuitive, flexible, into the hands of the frontline users to be able to respond to this complexity in a more timely manner.
Yeah, I think this empowering of end users, this is something what is happening now in IT world, and I think we cannot stop it anymore.
Right. I think it's certainly, just because, like you mentioned earlier, I think we're all getting accustomed to that in our own private lives and in the consumer world, particularly with a lot of the social media, you know, applications that we interface with. You know, but then from another perspective, you know, when you think about from a cross-company collaboration, communication, you know, standpoint, you know, I would think that certainly there's a lot of momentum today with cloud-based solutions, you know, network-based solutions, as I like to call them. I would think that is another critical component, you know, to this is, you know, kind of looking at your supply chain from a network-based perspective, and then having a technology platform that is also network-based.
Exactly. I believe the current technology, so the cloud, let's say in general, this is, I think, the first time that people can connect the suppliers in a faraway country just at a click of the mouse. Yeah. So this is really typically the integration of external parties is on technical level is not anymore a problem. This is what is sometimes a challenge, is to ensure that you are talking the same language. So per analogy, I would say, like in the previous or past years, you can just pick up the phone and phone the supplier on the other side, but you still speak probably two different languages, Chinese and English, let's say, or German and English, and this is the same in IT. So just the technical connectivity, this is just bread and butter right now. But the clue is to be able to understand the data from each party, that the supplier is sending you something which is really meaningful, and on the other side that is good quality. And this is, I think, the main competence of especially our company. I guess that we have really good quality interfaces to many suppliers and carriers around the world, and with this quality we can offer that to our customers also.
Yeah, I think another aspect that's getting more attention today, particularly from a network-based solution or perspective, was, and I'm going to overly simplify here, but it used to be that for a lot of supply chain organizations, the main form of communication and integration was EDI, and they only kind of integrated with their very largest trading partners because they were the only ones that had EDI capabilities themselves. I think you fast forward it today, moving forward, a lot of companies are recognizing that 80-20 rule is no longer sufficient, that they really need to integrate, communicate, collaborate with even those long tail, partners and, suppliers, logistics service providers and the like, that historically they're the ones that they had to, pick up the phone and call, or it was all paper-based via fax. But bringing them onto the network now with some of these newer technologies is something that I think a lot more companies are looking for. Do you see that as well with your customers, looking to kind of bring on a greater percentage and try to strive for 100% connectivity, if you will?
Yes, very often I hear that, for example, a plane cannot fly even when one tiny part, which is maybe even a kind of commodity part, but it is not available. Yeah. So from that perspective, really have total visibility in the complete supplier base. This is really vital for manufacturers especially. And I believe a similar thing is on distribution logistics when you ship the goods to your customers.
Right. So so how do you, when you look at, supply chain professionals, right? How can supply chain professionals kind of get buy-in from their IT colleagues, upper management, and their trading partners to make the necessary changes and investments to kind of move in this direction?
So, I think it very much depends on the company culture. The more companies open for new ideas and innovation, the easier it is, I believe, to buy in someone, to reach with your idea to even upper management. But I can imagine that there are still companies where this, let's say, culture need to be built. And from our experience, I think the best would be to start small, to start to build a small but viable business case and try to build a project around that. And then with existing IT offering, I believe you are able to pretty fast deliver an IT solution that supports this change in your process, for example. And this is how you can also build trust between supply chain people and IT people when they are able really within 1 or 2 months deliver something which is workable and which brings value to the business. And with such a small business case, I believe it's much easier than talking to upper management, showing them real solution, real value, what it can bring to the company, and then trying to buy them in for a larger project.
Yeah, and I agree. I think always, the approach of trying to get those small wins, those small success proof points, if you will, always helps to, get that buy-in, not only, like you said, from the trading partners, but also, for upper management. I think for, even for upper management, obviously, a lot of times you have to put, even for a small, project, you still have to be able to tie it into the, the financials side of things. How is this going to save us money, or how is this going to help us increase revenue, or how is this going to help us respond to a competitive threat. So I think that those are some of the pieces there as well, right?
Yeah, definitely. And the more, let's say, beneficial such a case is in terms of financials also for the company, I believe the easier it is to convince others.
Yeah, and I think as long as the the costs and the benefits are clear and measurable, and it's balanced, right? So that particularly from the external party standpoint, to say, hey, we're doing this, it's not only going to benefit us, it's also going to benefit you in these ways, right? And so that they can see a value proposition at their end as well, and even internally, right? If you need the help of warehousing, if you need the help of inventory management, if you need the help of finance or supplier management, it's communicating internally, why this is, why the value proposition is not just limited to one department, but really, spans across, different organizations.
Yeah, I think the main obstacle is sometimes also in our head. I believe many of us are still thinking in IT investment as a kind of multi-billion investment, years long. So whenever you start to talk about something like that, having this in mind, I believe it's hard to convince someone. But when you show a real life example, when something was really introduced fast and delivered the value, then it's much easier to start with that.
Yeah, and I think it's a great that's a great point, and I think in our private lives, I mean, we see how quickly if you think of an app, I mean, it really, literally takes no time to download an app and start using a new app, to do something, or whether it's LinkedIn or Facebook or any other application, we can enable new functionality, with a click of a mouse, and we can start doing something new and different. Obviously in the B2B realm, I don't want to suggest that it's that quick and easy, but to your point, it is vastly different today, or the capabilities are vastly there today to enable that analogous type of time frame and cost, where that wasn't true 10, 15 years ago. So I think, to your point, I think that mindset of I think that the mindset is anything that involves LT is going to take multiple years. It's going to take many millions of dollars, and that's just not true today, right?
Yeah, true. And even with some of our customers, we use this approach, try before buy, which is, let's say, very common for small popular software. But even in this enterprise software, what we offer right now, we're able to establish very quickly a kind of best practice scenario. Of course, this doesn't fit ideally to the process of a customer, but then during dialogue, during the operations, you're able to adapt the tool to the real customer requirement. Great
example there. Well, Artur, we're kind of running short on time here, so I'm just going to go right to my last question. I mean, as a way to wrap up, I mean, what questions should companies ask to determine if their IT capabilities are aligned with what it takes to succeed in this age of supply chain complexities? I mean, what action should they take to close whatever gaps they have?
Yeah, so I think there are a couple of areas in which they can try to audit, let's say, their own internal operations around here. So one of the first questions I would ask is how easy it is right now to use the IT tools they have. Or another is, for example, how easy it is to integrate external partners. If we talk about this total supply chain visibility, how much effort it is, and independently how IT sophisticated the supplier is. I mean, you can have some mind shops where they do not have an IT system inside, but they can use a web browser to deliver you basically the same information as the more sophisticated ones. Another, I would say, we talk a lot about this project agility. So how fast really the project can complete and deliver value. This is another question. And I think the last one, which we also talked about, is that any company right now, I believe they have some sort of IT systems. And the question is, let's say, how much the real process deviates from the one supported by the IT tools. How many of the operations are still done manually? I believe this is something which allows a supply chain professional build a picture in her or his head to see how big the gap between the current IT supporting systems and the real supply chain processes is, and yeah, then potentially make the next steps.
Yeah, no, those are all good questions. I like that last point. I think it would be very informative and educational for, a VP of supply chain or VP of logistics to, after lunch today, walk down to one of their operations and just sit and watch and see how, someone on the front lines is executing a process. And to your point, see how much of it is being executed within whatever system they have, and see where they, step away from the solution because they need to access a spreadsheet to do something else, or they need to send a fax or maybe pick up a phone call, and then see what percent roughly is being done through the solution versus being done through these, non-integrated, more manual, systems.
Yeah, definitely. I believe this is a good exercise for any manager, because my feeling is that this information or imagination, let's say, how an IT infrastructure in our company looks like, it blurs the higher it goes in the management. So sometimes I think just going through the factory floor, as you mentioned, and watching people how they really do things, yeah, this can be definitely very beneficial.
Yeah, no, great. So there's one key action you can all take for those of you that are listening. Well, Artur, we're out of time, and like I always say at the end of all our episodes, we always just manage to scratch the surface on these topics. But thank you for sharing your perspective and your insights and your advice on this topic. And I'm sure it's something that we're going to continue to write about and talk about in the weeks and months to come. So again, thank you for making the time to be with us today.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate also that.
Great. I want to thank those of you who joined us today. If you're watching this episode on demand, either at the Axit website or the Talking Logistics website, and you want to ask, submit a question for Artur or a comment, you can do so via that medium. I'm sure that Artur will be more than happy to respond via that medium. So again, thank you all for joining us today, and look forward to seeing you in a future episode of Talking Logistics. Have a great day.